The Creepy Stalker. Evelyn Parker was a 20-year-old college student, majoring in psychology at a small but reputable university. She lived alone in a cozy, one-bedroom apartment just off campus, a space she had meticulously decorated with warm colors, cozy blankets, and shelves filled with books. Evelyn was an introvert by nature, finding solace in her studies, her close-knit group of friends, and her solo morning jogs through the nearby park. It started innocuously enough. One sunny afternoon, after returning from a particularly grueling psychology lecture, Evelyn found a small, neatly wrapped package on her doorstep. It was unusual, but she assumed it was a misplaced delivery or a surprise gift from one of her friends. Inside, she found a beautifully crafted origami crane and a note that simply read, "For you." Evelyn chuckled, thinking it was a harmless prank or a sweet gesture from an anonymous admirer. She placed the crane on her desk and thought little of it. However, the gifts kept coming. Over the next few weeks, she received several more small packages. Each contained a different handmade item: a tiny woven bracelet, a hand-painted pebble, a delicate paper flower, always accompanied by a note with phrases like, "Thinking of you," or "Hope this brightens your day." Though slightly puzzled, Evelyn found them charming and harmless, and she continued to display the gifts around her apartment. But then, the tone of the notes began to change. One morning, she found a package containing a small, vintage key. The note attached read, "A key to my heart." It felt overly intimate and left her with an uneasy feeling. She mentioned it to her best friend, Clara, during their lunch date, brushing it off with a nervous laugh. "Evelyn, that's a bit creepy, don't you think?" Clara said, her brow furrowed with concern. Evelyn shrugged it off, trying not to overthink it. Days later, she found another package. This time, it contained a small, worn-out doll with a note saying, "I always watch over you." Evelyn's unease grew. She started feeling paranoid, constantly glancing over her shoulder and double-checking her door locks. The final straw came one night when she returned home late after a study session at the library. Exhausted, she went straight to bed. But as she pulled back her covers, she found a note on her pillow, "Sweet dreams, Evelyn." Her heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. She was certain she had locked all the doors and windows before leaving, and yet, someone had been inside her apartment. The note on the pillow was the turning point. Evelyn stood frozen, the small scrap of paper held tightly in her trembling hand. "Sweet dreams, Evelyn." The words seemed to mock her, a sinister presence invading the one place she had always felt safe. Her mind raced with questions. How had someone gotten into her locked apartment? How long had they been watching her? Why her? She frantically checked the locks on her doors and windows, confirming that they were indeed secure. She even inspected the air vents and any other possible points of entry, but nothing seemed amiss. That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the apartment seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The once cozy and comforting space now felt like a prison, filled with unseen dangers. The next day, Evelyn installed security cameras in her apartment. She placed them strategically, one at the entrance, another in the living room, and one in her bedroom, aimed directly at her bed. She hoped the cameras would provide a sense of security, or at the very least capture evidence of the intruder. Days passed, and although the cameras captured her every move, they showed nothing out of the ordinary. Evelyn's paranoia grew. She started noticing subtle changes in her apartment. A picture frame slightly tilted, a book out of place, the lingering scent of a stranger's cologne. She began to question her own sanity. Was she imagining things, or was someone really invading her space? Her behavior changed. She stopped going out unless absolutely necessary. Her social interactions dwindled, and she became increasingly isolated. She found herself constantly on edge, jumping at the slightest noise. Her friends noticed the change in her demeanor. Clara, her best friend, tried to intervene. "Evelyn, you need to get out of this apartment for a while," Clara insisted during a rare visit. "Come stay with me. This place is driving you crazy." But Evelyn refused. She felt a perverse need to stay and confront whatever was haunting her, to prove to herself that she wasn't losing her mind. One night, as Evelyn was reviewing the camera footage, she noticed something chilling. In the footage from her bedroom, a shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the frame, just for a moment, before disappearing again. Her heart pounded in her chest. She rewound the footage and watched it again and again. The figure was there, unmistakable, lurking in the background. She took the footage to the police, but they were skeptical. The figure was too indistinct, too shadowy to identify or even confirm as a person. They suggested it could be a trick of the light or a glitch in the camera. Evelyn knew better. The figure was real and it was watching her. Desperation set in. She bought more locks, reinforcing her doors and windows. She installed motion sensor lights and even considered getting a dog for protection. But nothing seemed to keep the intruder at bay. The notes and gifts continued to appear, each one more sinister than the last. One particularly terrifying night, she awoke to find a note taped to her forehead. "You can't hide from me," it read. Evelyn screamed, tearing the note off and searching her apartment for any sign of the intruder. But as always, there was nothing. Her world was crumbling around her. The once rational, composed psychology student was now a paranoid, sleep-deprived wreck. She was living in constant fear, feeling the stalker's presence even in her dreams. The sense of being watched, the fear of the unknown, was driving her to the brink of madness. Evelyn sat at her desk, eyes red from lack of sleep, and stared at her computer screen. It had become a nightly ritual. Review the security footage, looking for anything out of the ordinary. She clicked through hours of uneventful video, each second amplifying her sense of dread. Just as she was about to give up, something caught her eye. In the footage from 2 nights ago, a shadowy figure appeared in the corner of her living room. The figure was indistinct, a dark blur that moved silently from the hallway to the kitchen, then vanished out of frame. Evelyn's heart pounded as she rewound and watched the clip again. This was no glitch, no trick of the light. Someone had been in her apartment. Frantically, she checked the footage from the previous nights and saw the figure again, always lingering in the background, just out of clear view. The realization that the intruder had been in her home multiple times sent shivers down her spine. Her worst fears were confirmed. She was being stalked, and the stalker was bold enough to enter her home repeatedly. Terrified and feeling utterly unsafe, Evelyn knew she couldn't stay in her apartment any longer. She called Clara, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. "Clara, I can't stay here. I need to leave tonight," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. Clara, alarmed by her friend's desperation, immediately offered her home as a refuge. "Pack a bag and come over. We'll figure this out together," Clara urged. Evelyn hurriedly packed a small suitcase with essentials, her movements frantic and disjointed. She threw in clothes, toiletries, and her laptop, making sure to grab the security footage as well. Her hands trembled as she locked her apartment door one last time and headed to Clara's. As Evelyn prepared to leave, she decided to take one last look around her apartment, ensuring she hadn't missed anything important. While in her bedroom, she noticed a slight draft coming from the ceiling. Curious and slightly apprehensive, she stood on her bed to investigate. There, hidden behind a loose ceiling panel, she discovered a small crawl space. Heart pounding, She climbed up and peered inside. What she found made her blood run cold. The crawl space was filled with photographs of herself, all taken while she was sleeping. There were notes detailing her daily routine, even down to the smallest habits. Among the items was a worn-out journal. She flipped through it, horrified to find detailed entries about her life, written by someone who knew her intimately. Suddenly, the realization hit her. The stalker was someone she knew and trusted. Before she could process the full horror of the situation, she heard a noise behind her. She turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows of her room. It was Noah, a classmate she had known for years and had considered a friend. His eyes were cold and calculating, a stark contrast to the friendly persona he had always presented. "Did you really think you could escape me, Evelyn?" he said, a chilling smile spreading across his face. Evelyn's heart raced as she backed away, her mind frantic for a way out. But the crawl space offered no escape, and Noah's presence blocked her path to the door. Desperation fueled her actions. She grabbed a heavy book from her nightstand and hurled it at him, momentarily stunning him. Seizing the opportunity, she dashed for the door, screaming for help. But as she reached the hallway, she felt a strong hand grab her arm, pulling her back into the darkness. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Noah's menacing smile and the glint of something metallic in his hand. Evelyn's scream echoed through the apartment. Then there was silence. The haunted doll. Sylvia and Miles Carter were a young couple in their late 20s, full of excitement and dreams for their future together. Sylvia, an art historian with a keen eye for antiques, and Miles, an architect passionate about restoring old buildings, seemed like the perfect match for their new home, an old Victorian house nestled on the outskirts of a quaint town. The house, with its grand facade and intricate woodwork, had stood empty for years. Its former glory had faded, but Sylvia and Miles saw potential. They spent their days cleaning, repairing, and gradually bringing the house back to life, relishing in every moment they spent together in their new home. One rainy afternoon, while exploring the attic, they stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk hidden beneath a pile of forgotten linens. Curiosity piqued. They opened it to reveal a treasure trove of forgotten items, the most notable being an antique doll. The doll was unlike anything Sylvia had ever seen. Its porcelain face, though smudged with dirt, bore a hauntingly lifelike expression. The delicate lace dress, though tattered and yellowed with age, hinted at a once elegant past. Sylvia's fascination was immediate. She carefully lifted the doll from the trunk, marveling at the craftsmanship and attention to detail. "We have to clean her up and display her," Sylvia said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Miles, though slightly uneasy, agreed, knowing how much Sylvia loved antiques. They took the doll downstairs, and Sylvia began meticulously cleaning it, unaware of the dark history and the malevolent spirit attached to it that was about to be unleashed upon their lives. The first strange event happened just a few days after Sylvia placed the newly cleaned doll on a shelf in their living room. Miles was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard a soft thud. He walked into the living room to find the doll lying on the floor, several feet away from its shelf. "Sylvia, did you move the doll?" Miles called out. Sylvia, puzzled, shook her head. "No, I left it right there. Maybe it just fell." Miles wasn't convinced, but he let it go. However, over the next few days, more objects began to move on their own. A chair in the dining room would be pulled out, picture frames would be tilted, and small items like keys and jewelry would go missing, only to turn up in odd places. Both Sylvia and Miles felt uneasy, but they attributed these incidents to the house settling or their own forgetfulness. Sylvia began experiencing vivid, terrifying nightmares. Every night, she dreamed of a ghostly child, pale and sad-eyed, wandering the halls of their house. In the dreams, the child would whisper unintelligible words, her voice filled with a sorrow that made Sylvia's heart ache. One night, the nightmare was particularly intense. Sylvia dreamed she was standing in the attic, watching the child cry over the doll. The child looked up, her eyes hollow and filled with despair, and whispered, "Help me." Sylvia woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Miles held her, trying to comfort her as she described the dream. "It's just a nightmare," he said, trying to reassure her. "It's not real." But Sylvia couldn't shake the feeling that the dreams were more than just figments of her imagination. The child's sorrow seemed too real, too palpable. As the days went by, the strange occurrences intensified. The whispers Sylvia had heard in her dreams began to manifest in the house. At night, both Sylvia and Miles could hear faint, disembodied whispers echoing through the halls. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy with tension, a constant sense of being watched pervading every room. Sylvia's obsession with the doll deepened. She began to feel a connection to the ghostly child in her dreams, convinced that the doll was the key to understanding the haunting. She spent hours talking to the doll, trying to coax out its secrets, much to Miles's increasing concern. "Sylvia, this is getting out of hand," Miles said one evening, watching her sit on the floor with the doll cradled in her lap. "You're scaring me. We need to do something about this." But Sylvia was undeterred. "I need to understand what's happening," she insisted. "I need to help her." The tension between them grew. Miles felt helpless, unable to reach Sylvia as she spiraled deeper into her obsession. The once warm and loving atmosphere of their home was now filled with fear and mistrust. The hauntings became more aggressive, with objects being thrown across rooms and doors slamming shut on their own. Sylvia and Miles were no longer just restoring a house. They were living in a nightmare, trapped by the restless spirit that had attached itself to the doll. And as Sylvia's nightmares continued, it became clear that the spirit was not going to rest until its story was told and its demands were met. The hauntings reached a fever pitch. Lights flickered violently, and objects hurled themselves across rooms with terrifying force. Miles, desperate to save Sylvia and himself, arranged for a priest to exorcise the house. The priest arrived, his presence bringing a brief sense of hope. As the priest began the exorcism, the house reacted violently. The temperature plummeted, and an oppressive force filled the air. The doll, sitting ominously on its shelf, seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Sylvia, clutching the doll, screamed as a ghostly wind swirled around her. "Leave this house," the priest commanded, but the spirit resisted fiercely. It became clear that the spirit was not just haunting the house. It was protecting the doll. In a desperate attempt to end the nightmare, Miles grabbed the doll from Sylvia's hands and tried to destroy it. As he raised a hammer to smash it, a ghostly apparition of the child materialized, her eyes glowing with rage and sorrow. "No!" the spirit screamed, and an invisible force flung Miles across the room. He hit the wall with a sickening thud and crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Sylvia, in shock, watched as the spirit turned its focus back to her. The spirit, now fully manifest, forced Sylvia to relive the child's tragic death. She saw through the child's eyes, experiencing the fear and pain of her final moments. Tears streamed down Sylvia's face as the child's memories flooded her mind. The spirit then merged with Sylvia, filling her with its sorrow and rage. The doll's eyes flickered to life, glowing with an eerie light. Sylvia's demeanor changed. Her expression became cold and distant. In a voice not entirely her own, she whispered, "We'll be together forever." The spirit had taken full possession of her, binding their souls for eternity. As the house fell silent, The priest fled in terror, leaving the possessed Sylvia alone with the doll. Miles's lifeless body lay as a grim testament to the spirit's vengeance. The doll, now an eternal symbol of the haunting, sat eerily still, its eyes glowing softly in the dim light. The Cursed Forest. Colin, Alara, Otis, Seraphine, and Zoe were a close-knit group of friends, each bringing a unique personality to the dynamic. Colin, the adventurous leader, was always looking for the next thrill. Alara, his girlfriend, was thoughtful and curious, often grounding Colin's wild ideas. Otis, the tech-savvy skeptic, loved debunking myths and legends. Seraphine, with her keen intuition and artistic soul, often sensed things others missed. Zoe, the free spirit and prankster, kept the group's spirits high with his humor. The friends decided to go camping in the mysterious Eldergloom Forest, lured by the thrill of exploring its dark legends. They had heard tales of a forbidden ritual performed centuries ago by an ancient druidic cult, which supposedly caused anyone who entered the forest to disappear. Skeptical yet excited, they dismissed the stories as mere folklore, eager to prove them wrong and have a memorable adventure. Around the campfire, the friends shared ghost stories, laughing off the eerie legends of the forest as mere myths. As night fell, strange noises echoed through the trees, and ghostly figures flickered in the shadows, unnerving the group. During the night, Zoe vanished without a trace. Panic set in as the remaining friends frantically searched for him, their fear growing with every passing minute. The once jovial atmosphere turned tense and foreboding. While searching for Zoe, the group stumbled upon cryptic symbols carved into the trees. The realization dawned on them. They were being hunted by something supernatural. Fear gripped them as they understood the true danger of the forest's legends. One by one, more friends began to vanish, starting with Otis and then Seraphine. Panic and desperation consumed Colin and Alara as their group dwindled, leaving them isolated and terrified. In their frantic search, Colin and Alara discovered a gruesome trail of blood leading deeper into the forest. Despite their fear, they reluctantly decided to follow the trail, clinging to the hope of finding their missing friends and uncovering the sinister truth of the forest. Colin and Alara followed the blood trail through the dense, foreboding forest until they stumbled upon an ancient stone circle. The stones, weathered by centuries, stood tall and imposing, casting long shadows in the moonlight. The atmosphere was thick with an ominous presence, making the air heavy and difficult to breathe. As they stepped closer, their worst fears were confirmed. There, in the center of the circle, lay the bodies of their friends, Zoe, Otis, and Seraphine, arranged in a disturbingly ritualistic manner. Symbols carved into the stones glowed faintly, pulsing with an eerie energy. The sight was both heartbreaking and horrifying, fueling Colin and Alara's resolve to end the terror. As they inspected the stone circle, Colin found ancient inscriptions that revealed the truth about the druidic cult and the eldritch entity they worshipped. As Wraith, a malevolent force demanding sacrifices. The realization hit hard. Their friends had become part of a dark ritual meant to appease the entity. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the circle, and the shadows seemed to coalesce into a tangible form. As Wraith emerged, an otherworldly figure with eyes that burned like embers, emanating a palpable aura of dread. Colin and Alara steeled themselves for a fight, knowing they faced almost certain doom. With each move, the entity seemed to anticipate them, its power overwhelming. Despite their fear, they fought bravely, their determination fueled by the desire to avenge their friends. In a desperate final act, Colin remembered the stories of breaking curses by disrupting the source. He realized that the stone circle was the anchor for Azrath's power. Grabbing a heavy rock, he began smashing the glowing symbols on the stones, each strike weakening the entity's hold on the physical world. Alara, chanting a protective spell she remembered from her research, managed to momentarily hold off his wraith, giving Colin the time he needed. With a final, powerful blow, Colin shattered the central stone, causing the entire circle to erupt in a burst of light. The entity let out a deafening scream as it dissolved into the night, its grip on the forest broken. The once ominous atmosphere lifted, replaced by an eerie silence. The forest, now seemingly free of its ancient curse, stood still and quiet. Colin and Alara, exhausted and grief-stricken, knew their friends had not died in vain. They had broken the curse, but the cost had been unbearably high. The forest was now at peace, but the memory of their ordeal would haunt them forever. Colin and Alara, weary but hopeful, made their way out of the forest, believing they had finally freed themselves from its sinister grasp. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and they felt a sense of relief as they approached the forest's edge. As they rested, Colin noticed a strange symbol appearing on his forearm, glowing faintly. Alara gasped as they both recognized it as the same symbol from the stone circle. The horrifying realization dawned on them. The curse had not been fully lifted, and Colin was now marked. Colin understood with growing dread that he was now destined to be the guardian of the forest, ensuring Ezraith was never unleashed again. Tears in his eyes, he explained to Alara that he could never leave. In the final scene, Colin stood at the edge of the forest, watching Alara walk away, her figure growing smaller until she disappeared from view. He turned back toward the forest, accepting his fate, knowing he was trapped forever to protect the world from this ancient evil.